How's it going? Good evening. Now, I know some people that those who might have watched my last vid, they don't like some of the things I've said. And I'm fine with that. And a lot of times, it's going to end up being people who they themselves are the ones committing shit like that, and they don't like it when people are telling their victims to stand up for themselves. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. If somebody's abusing you, whether they're male or female, you have a right to stand up and defend yourself. You have right to protect your well-being, and whether it's your mental well-being or your physical, you have right to defend yourself from anybody. In fact, I'm just gonna go this way. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this is more or less kind of some of the things that I was taught as a child, not necessarily by my parents, but by my grandparents. My grandmother, in particular, was my primary... She was the primary person to speak up on this shit, because she was really fucking against it, too. Because she went through a lot of domestic abuse from one of my grandpas. Well, I think both of them. Because there's my mom's dad, and then there's my step-grandpa, but my mom has half brothers and sisters that's their dad. So I'm gonna do my best to try and keep on track on this too, and because I'm gonna be sharing and speaking not just terms, but things that were taught back then, and what that generation believed in. There's kind of a reason why it's beyond just the whole World War II, World War I aspect of that generation, that I call them the Iron Men and Iron Women of our time, and all that, because they went through a lot of shit, and it wasn't just the wars going on, it wasn't just how do I say it, because I don't want to necessarily get flagged or in trouble on this. It wasn't just like kind of like what we were dealing with C-19. I guess that's the easiest way to say it, I guess, where they were dealing with their shit back then with that stuff. And then they were also dealing with shady law enforcement, shady politics with a lot of stuff back then. They were dealing with a lot of shady shit. They didn't have the laws like we do now. And what I'm finding is the laws that we're creating is starting to restrict the victims of people who are abusing them. They're actually restricting people from being able to protect themselves, while they reward the people who are doing it. One of the most famous terms, and I know everybody's heard it, and a lot of people get angry about it, and a lot of it is because they're being emotionally driven. They're not thinking about the circumstances that these situations involve. And one of the most famous terms that people hear and don't like, because I didn't agree with it at first, because I didn't quite understand the term of it till I really learned it from my grandma before she passed away. And that is, a woman, if she puts herself into the shoes of a man, she is going to be treated like a man. If she is to act like a man, she is to be treated like a man. Now, does this stuff sound familiar? Because we hear quite a bit over the last couple of years of certain people want to identify as certain things and be treated as such. And we are supposed to respect that, right? If you want genuine equality, it's going to happen in every facet of that being. Neither men or women have right to abuse each other in any way, shape, or form. And if they do so, they are accepting the repercussions of what happens from that. There's also the famous saying, and it's mainly in science, but it applies to everything. For every action, there's an equal or greater reaction. go to treat somebody like shit, you're taking on the acceptance and responsibility of knowing that that person may respond and react in the same level of treatment or greater towards you. This also falls in line, and I know a lot of people believe this too, for everything that you put out there in the world, it will come back to you threefold. And depending on the circumstances, it could come back to you tenfold. People need to realize that all these things apply to everything that you do. See, in that generation, it wasn't just men, they had women. They had women beating their husbands with fucking cast iron skillets. Could you imagine how people would react to that these days? They'd just be like, why didn't you beat him to death? But you also, simultaneously, you had women back then who knew that they were allowed to defend themselves from an abusive husband. And you know what they did? They had, like what my grandma and what my mother told me is what they called was an equalizer. My grandma used to keep a broomstick in the kitchen and all that stuff in case one of my grandpas, I don't know which one, but one of them, you know, if they started to get out of line or something and started to put their hands on her, she'd beat them with a fucking broom handle. And I think I'm going to have to pull over up here because we've got, looks like, the fire department behind us. And so I got to find a place to pull over. This might work. I might have enough room. Got another one coming. No, a lot of people these days don't agree with that messaging that generation has to say, yet they don't realize that those women didn't become as strong as they did if they were not taught that it was okay for them to protect themselves. Same thing with those men back then. Nobody, and I mean nobody, and this is exactly what I was taught, deserves to be abused in any way, shape, or form. Mentally, emotionally, sexually, physically, etc. And if they are to do so to someone like that, they better expect an equal or greater reaction. Some people would be like, well, why don't you just call the cops? Or why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just do that? Because sometimes, in the end, what ends up happening is the person still gets away with it. And they go on to repeat it on the next person. And depending on the form of abuse, they will end up leaving a path of people that have been seriously fucking harmed and mentally incapacitated from that abuse. My grandma used to talk about how different ways that women would use to protect themselves from their husbands, and she'd also talk about how men would have to protect themselves from their wives. See, it's kind of strange that my grandparents' generation recognized that abuse was not specific to a gender or a race or a religion or a culture or nationality. It's not specific to any. They also recognized it did not matter if you were a man or woman being abused by a man or woman. You had every single bit of right to protect yourself and defend yourself. And one thing that she definitely covered was that if somebody is mentally abusing you to the point that you end up becoming aggressive in reaction, what that person was doing in essence was biting it, kind of along the lines of the term biting the hand that feeds you, or yeah, not biting the hand that feeds you, but well, yeah, kind of, because back then, yeah, the men may have been the one working and all the time and bringing home the money, while the women were being the caregivers, the homemakers, and stuff like that. They're the ones feeding their husbands. They're the ones doing the shopping. By far majority, unless the guy was single. Yeah, they had a lot of strict shit back then. There's a lot of shit that went on back then that nobody should agree with. But the fact remains is, I've noticed these days, a lot of people are getting away with committing abuse in various forms, and majority of it is mental, emotional abuse. And because it leaves no mark, people don't think it's a big deal. They think it's okay, and they'll call you weak. But the moment they get the shit kicked out of them, that's when they want to sit back and go, oh no, that can't happen. But it should make you stronger. What doesn't break you makes you stronger, right? I know what some of the shit I'm saying is pissing people off. For some that may end up watching this. But it's still a fact. You don't have right to abuse people. Period. Whether you went through some form of abuse as a child and you want to use that as your fallback to how you treat people now, that doesn't justify shit. When you abuse somebody to the point that they end up having to fight back and defend themselves in any way, shape, or form because they have no other choice, you put them in a position of feeling like last resort. That fight or flight, non-stop fight or flight defense is going on non-stop 24/7 for so long. What do you think the reaction of that is going to be? It's going to be greater, not so much equal. Women and men have the right to protect themselves. They don't have a right to go and intentionally hurt someone or harm someone in any way, shape, or form. For no fucking reason. Or even just being spiteful. You don't have a right to manipulate people. You don't have a right to fuck with their heads. You don't have the right to fucking do all this fucked up shit to them and expect there to be no reaction. You're going to have the similar reactions to those abuse as you would to people who were physically abused and sexually abused. You're going to damage people doing that shit. And when they finally fucking break, and you do, obviously, for some of you, it's probably what you aim for, especially the narcs out there. They really want their victims to break down and snap so that then they can claim that that victim is the abusive one. So many men and women have experienced that very thing. And every single fucking one of them has the right to stand up and defend themselves regardless of the outcome. Whether people like what they did or not. Whether they like what they did or not. The person that has the responsibility of taking somebody who, nobody's perfect. Everybody, has arguments and shit like that. But when you break somebody down to developing certain characteristics or traits because they're having to defend themselves or protect themselves or be on guard 24/7 from somebody who's constantly abusing them in some way, shape, or form, neglecting them, all of it, eventually what that person never was, they're going to end up becoming, even just for a moment, because of that abuse. I don't know how many women out there have been treated a certain way for so long, then they end up snapping on the person abusing them, and then they're the ones who end up getting in trouble for it. Men go through that a lot too. They go through it just as much. That's Heck, they probably go through it more than women in that sense, but not to that level or degree that I'm referencing to. Because women by nature are manipulative as is. If they want something, they'll use their body, or they'll use their assets. We'll just say it that way, to get what they want. And they know they can do it. And they also know that these days, it's always going to be a female's word over a male's word. And for some women out there, and this isn't meant as an attack for some of these other communities, but it's called a realization. For some women, they're starting to realize that a man who identifies as a woman, his word is going to come before hers now. So she's going to get to know what it's like to be treated equally to that of a man. When a man's word overrides hers, because he identifies as a woman. A lot of women out there have experienced that these days, and I'm talking about naturally born women, and I'm not trying to attack people on this. It's just, you see this all the time, and it's not hard to go online and see this shit. Where gender recognition overrides natural born genders. It's the same treatment that men have gotten for I don't know how long, where the woman's word overrides the man's word. And yes, there is, to a degree, I can understand why that happened. Because a lot of men in the past abused their position. And a lot of women had to deal with the shortcomings from that. We're living in a day and age now where both sides are equal. Granted, depending on chosen career paths, all that stuff, wages are not always going to be the same. And I do understand in some workplaces, you do have some employers who are asshats that pay differently based on those stupid shit. And a lot of them are old fuckers that are from that generation, that find ways around these laws. I don't know how many places I've worked at, the women were making more money than me, and did I bitch about it? No, I didn't care. That was because they earned it. Not because they had vaginas. They earned it. I'm one of those people, I couldn't care if I was married, if my wife made more money than me or not. I could not care. I couldn't care if I made more money than her. Because your relationship isn't about who makes more money. It's not a competition. It's about working together to a common goal of having a happier life together, even if both people have a different chosen career path. My grandparents' generation, they learned by, obviously, experience. But when we start going back, thinking about the different morals, values, this type of stuff, and all that stuff, and going, well, some of that contradicts. No, it doesn't. Humans are still animals. Whether people like to accept it or not. I don't care how fucking big of a home, how much money you got, what kind of vehicle you have, anything. You're still a fucking animal by nature. And I use this analogy in my last video. When you abuse a dog, eventually that animal is going to snap and bite you. And in today's society, we have two problems in that situation. One big problem going on, and the other one's not so much a problem. But it does kind of add to these other ones. When the dog snaps and bites the owner, two things will happen. Either that dog ends up getting put down because the owner didn't get caught for animal abuse, or that owner ends up going to jail for animal abuse, and that animal eventually, the animal, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, will be worked with and rehabilitated. An abused animal can be rehabilitated to be in a home and be safely around even children and other animals. Just like humans can be. Humans, when you abuse them enough, they eventually snap and they bite. But we have a problem in our species that we consistently put down in prison or lock up the victims of those who are being abused because they reacted to the abuse to protect themselves. All of it. Nobody looks at the damage that was done to that person for them to get to that point. And what happens? The person that was abusing them, they get away with it. They get to go on to the next person and do it again. And we don't allow people to do this to animals, but we allow people to do this shit to other people. When it comes to narcissistic abuse and shit like that, and that is a big one for me, there needs to be laws in place for that. If someone's getting in trouble and getting caught abusing their animals and even abusing them for the purpose of dogfighting to get those animals to become aggressive, those people go to jail and they lose their ability to ever be able to possess an animal ever again. The same thing needs to happen to people like that. Male or female, I don't care who you fucking are. If you're going to be abusing people and you're going to be messing with their mental and emotional state of living, and you're going to be fucking with it, and you're going to be twisting it and abusing it and doing all this fucked up shit to it until that person has a complete and utter breakdown and it changes them permanently, you deserve prison. You deserve to be locked in a hospital room where you can learn not to do that shit to people again. Because all you're doing is you're destroying all these people. And as I explained in my last vid, two things happen. They do one of two things. It ruins the people, period, regardless. Just like it ruins an animal when you abuse them enough, it ruins them. Those people either end up struggling to deal with trust with anybody again, especially if they start to see certain traits in people that resemble those same traits of those that abuse them. So then you just ruin their life on finding happiness in that format, because now they have to fear other people doing to them what their abuser did to them. But then you got the others who end up taking that abuse and they become so angry and hateful and bitter and spiteful that they start to abuse people themselves. Then they end up carrying on that sin, and in essence, they get to possibly take the punishment for what their abuser did to them. You see that a lot happening. You see that a lot actually when it comes to sexual abuse victims. Two things happen. They never trust people like that ever again. They learn to some degree cope with it. Whether it happens right away or not, they eventually end up having to get therapy and help, and that abuse does not go any further than them. And then you've got the other person who ends up repeating that abuse, and it carries on. And the person who abused them gets away with it, where they're the ones who end up in jail, when realistically both need to go to jail at that point. Because it's not about justifying that abuse. It's the fact that when that happens, they now became the abuser. They went from being the victim of a monster to becoming the monster that victimized them. I do not. No, nobody, and it's not just myself, nobody should ever be expected to be obligated to take the abuse from somebody and to just deal with it. Because if they respond to it, and they have to fear being thrown in jail or something because of the abuse, and they have to fear that if they leave, they're going to lose everything, Like, my situation, my abuser tried taking my house, and their name wasn't on it. They didn't own it, nothing. They literally tried taking a home that they lived in for free by abusing the piss out of me till they got the reaction they were looking for so that they could throw me in jail. And then after that, started utilizing the legal system as a form of abuse to try and take my home from me because they wouldn't leave. And why were they constantly told to leave? Because they were not helping. They were not prioritizing a relationship that they would tell you how much they love you and how much they want to marry you and be with you while they were fucking cheating on you. While they're out telling your kids, their family, their friends, their employers, everyone, what kind of crazy, lazy piece of shit you are. And then when they finally mentally break you down enough after having you alienated, isolated, and demonized for so long, and they get that reaction out of you, they can then claim to be the victim and you're the one who's getting in trouble. It's called reactive abuse. I lost everything to my abuser. Everything. Including myself. And so I've been having to try and repiece myself back together, as I've said before. I'm not ever going to be the same again. I recognize that I'm, in essence, damaged goods now, and I need help. And until then, I do my best to avoid people in a general sense. I'm not comfortable being around different people, and like I said, if I pick up on certain traits that a person has that resembles that of the person that treated me the way they did for so fucking long, it's a trigger for me. Do I go become abusive and do all this other shit? No, I just don't want anything to do with those people. And sometimes I will make it clear to them why I don't want to talk to them or have anything to do with them. And they may not like what is said or they hear, but it's like, no, I'm not just going to ghost you necessarily, but I am going to make it clear why. Some people I will straight up cut off. Just no. Because like the moment I pick that shit up, it's like, nope, I'm not dealing with that. So that abuse that I went through destroyed my friendships, even through me. I started distancing myself from people on my own because I didn't want to be in trouble or accused of something that I wasn't doing. And that's where I talked about, made the comment last night about a situation that I dealt with where I was getting accused of cheating because I went out and had a Coke in a public space with a friend of mine and I called him a friend because they were never... I'm trying not to give too much to their identity. The person that tried to accuse me of cheating and all that, when they found out and all that, knows who the person is and knows the situation. They got to go through the realization after they proceeded to come into my home and accuse me of shit I didn't do, because I went and had a soda with a friend. I told him, yeah, it actually felt nice. It was actually nice to feel like I was wanted around by somebody. Oh, you're cheating. This, that, yeah. No. Because they jumped straight to that conclusion. That was because that was their guilt showing. That showed proof right there that I wasn't allowed to have friends unless it was somebody they approve of, and it doesn't matter who it was, male or female. I couldn't be friends with anybody without the fear of being accused of something. And the only person I could technically regularly talk to or converse with, because they've been, in essence, been labeled and projected as just being a fucking drunk. So why listen to that person, when it comes down to it? And that's my best friend. They don't care. They also know my best friend isn't the type of person to go around and talk a bunch of shit. He's not that guy. The irony is, though, he's not a drunk, and all. He likes his drink, but he's not. He doesn't have the. He's not the drinker that he was. I'll just say that he's cleaned his shit up quite a bit, which has been good, and I've been proud of my buddy about that. But I wasn't allowed to have any other friends. I couldn't respond. Like, another example is, I had somebody custom make a blacksmith hammer for me, and they were showing me, sending me pictures of each step of the process that they were doing along the way as they were making this hammer for me. And I was hearting the images because I was loving the work that they were doing. I got accused of cheating on my narc with a Middle Eastern man from Pakistan who was making a hammer for me because I loved his work. See, the common thing that everybody tends to know, and it's a true term, if somebody's going to keep accusing you of cheating, then you know damn well they're cheating on you. And when they've already admitted to doing it once, they've already admitted to seeking attention from multiple people, it's kind of hard for them to keep pointing fingers. I'm not ready to be with anybody right now in that sense. My grandparents, as I said, they believed in, regardless of whether you're a man or woman, you had right to protect yourself and defend yourself. That a man or woman does not have right to treat somebody that way. That a real man does not go out treating people like shit for no fucking reason. And a real woman or lady does not go acting like a fucking man. Both men and women are, regardless of their sexuality, are capable of masculine and feminine traits. And what's considered to be feminine would be that of being somebody who's more nurturing, caring, kind, loving, that type of stuff. Aggression, being aggressive, aggression, that type of stuff. Being spiteful, seeking vengeance, that type of shit. That is masculine. That's considered masculine traits. So for all those women out there who hate men, stop acting like a man. For all you men out there who are using their sexuality or their gender as an excuse to treat women like shit, and even just the men out there who are intentionally treating women like shit, you're not a man. You're not anything like that. When you're intentionally treating people like shit, your family like shit, you're intentionally abusing people, taking advantage of them, using them, manipulating them, lying to them, doing all this shit, you're not a man or woman. You're a piece of shit. And when you do stuff that puts people in the position that they feel they have no choice but to defend themselves and protect themselves, and they have to stand up for themselves, you're not a man or a woman. You're not a real man or a real gentleman and all that, and you're not a lady or a woman. You're a piece of shit. You're abusive. And you need to get help, just like the people you're abusing. They need help too. And until some of you start recognizing that what you're doing is not okay, you're going to deal with reactions that you don't like from people that you tell that you love while you abuse them. You can't go around and sit there and go, well, I'm afraid of this person because they might do this and or that and blah, 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 blah. Because you're abusing them. Using people's reactions to scream abuse is not okay. When you're taking advantage of people and you're abusing them and to get a reaction, you're responsible for that reaction. If you're a man who starts to, if you end up, let's say you end up you start verbally abusing your your significant other, your wife, whatever, for no fucking reason. You're being a fucking asshole to them. Outright just being an asshole. You know they have every right to slap you. Because you don't have right to treat a woman that way. As for you ladies, you do not have a right to treat a man as if he's not good enough because he doesn't make enough money. All this other shit. You don't have a right to treat a man like shit because your expectations raise higher and higher and higher anytime he reaches a set expectation that you have for him. If you keep raising your expectations, you're going to break a person down. You're going to end up with an abusive man then. It's called teamwork. Expecting him to know what you want all the time, expecting him to know what you're thinking all the time, to expect him to do what you want all the fucking time without communication or anything, you deserve the things that happen at that point. You deserve for them to get angry with you about it. You don't deserve to be abused, but you do deserve to, when people say, I've had enough. Fucking talk, communicate. This shit needs to stop. You guys doing that shit, you deserve that too. Now, man or woman, you got to put your hands on your other half. You deserve to get it in return. You don't have a right to treat a person like a punching bag. Whether it's an emotional punching bag or a physical punching bag. You do not have that right. Otherwise, expect to get it in return. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. Everybody has the right to protect themselves any way they need to necessary, even from their own family. After all, 99% of the time that abuse that is happening is coming from your own family. I don't agree with people hurting each other whatsoever. That's not okay. And a lot of times people are like, well, just turn a cheek and then present the other one so they can hit you there too. Oh, so then when you turn around, they can turn around and hit one of those cheeks and then hit the other one too? Yes, you're to avoid those types of people. You're to walk away from those types of people. But God also doesn't want you to be a fucking punching bag and put you in a position that it does harm to you in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, you to forgive and do your best and all with those types of things. Yet when you're dealing with family, you can't just turn around and walk away. You're not dealing with a stranger. You're not dealing with... You're not dealing with somebody that you're not going home to, that you live with, you share life with, your bills with, all this shit. When you're dealing with people like that, people that you are stuck, not necessarily stuck with, but you're attached to by various reasons and all, from financial, emotional, marital, all of it. It's not one of those things where you just one day just up and walk. And if you do, no. Well, I can't say no, because you have the right to leave. I'm trying not to twist or misconstrue what I'm trying to point out here. And I know what I'm starting to say is not sounding right, and that's why I'm trying to re-clarify some of this. It's just, I'll say it over and over again, and I'm gonna cut it here because I'm losing track of what I'm trying to get across and what I've been saying the whole time. Is that it doesn't matter what gender you are or anything. You don't have a right to abuse people. And if you do, the only right you've got is to accept the reaction and response that people have towards you when you do it. I understand why, after when my grandma explained and all that stuff, and even my mom, that my grandma would keep a broom handle in the kitchen in case my grandpa got out of hand. One of my grandpas or whatever, she'd beat him with that fucking broomstick. Did you ever do time? No. And he stopped the shit when he got the shit beat out of him.
from my understanding, my grandpa was not really, as far as I understand, towards my grandma, the one that she did it to wasn't so much physically abusive as he was verbally and mentally and emotionally and all that shit. There was sexual abuse that happened where my grandpa's was concerned, and then my mom and her siblings. Yes, there was a lot of abuse in my family, and instead of trying to repeat that family curse, I've tried to learn from it and all that. Try to be that person that does not allow that to continue. And when people start to abuse me, I will open my mouth and say something. I will defend myself, even if it gets me in trouble or hurt. I expect the same thing from anybody else, man or woman. And when hearing about women beating their husbands with frying pans while they're asleep in bed, and then other times women sewing their husbands in their bed, the sheets together so they can't get up so that they can beat on their husbands, or women poisoning their husbands. And this was happening not just in homes where, like, they might have had an abusive husband. This was also happening in homes where the wife was cheating, where the woman was sleeping with another man, having an affair. And usually in homes that type of shit's happening, somebody's having an affair. The man or the woman. Somebody's out doing something that they should not be. While the other one is taking on all the responsibility of that relationship or marriage and all that shit. Again, man or woman, you have the right to protect and defend yourself regardless of who your fucking abuser is, whether they're male or female. There's a reason why that generation has it very much ingrained in them, because not only did some of them experience it, they witnessed it, they grew up in it and all that. Watching mothers abusing their dads, watching dads abusing their mothers, all this shit. And watching their mom or dad having to physically defend themselves. There's a reason why there's the term that if a woman is going to act like a man and step into the shoes of being a man, they're going to get treated like one. Just as if a man is going to intentionally do harm, to abuse a woman, they're going to get the living shit beat out of them. Whether by that woman with a broomstick or a frying pan, or it's family. When it becomes a genuine problem, is when one or the other is abusing their other half or their significant other, whatever, mentally and emotionally, to the point that person snaps and becomes physically aggressive. Then that person who snaps from that abuse ends up becoming the target for everyone else, because everyone else does not know about the abuse that they were going through to bring them to that point. See, when I look at some of not just my situations and stuff, and I look at other people's situations, I notice that there's a common factor when it comes to people doing that shit. They're not, they themselves, when they've abused somebody in those fashions, it's because somebody has abused them in that fashion. And whoever abused that person did that too. Like I said, it's like an STD. It passes on. And sometimes some people their forms of abuse will evolve. Like, I know a couple people, because I'm not going to say their names. I know exactly who they are, and I know one of them watches this too, and they know exactly who I'm talking about. Had gone from the history of abusing their parent
verbally and physically. From verbally abusing them to physically trying to choke them out until their parents' face turns blue. And then that abuse eventually evolved into other forms of abuse, which eventually evolved to narcissistic abuse, because when they got in trouble for the physical abuse of children, their abusive nature evolved from that of physical to being purely mental and emotional. Because there's no marks being left, it's easier to get away with it. That's why it's really hard to prove mental and emotional abuse, let alone narcissistic abuse, because that's 90% of narcissistic abuse is all mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, all of it. Minus the physical. The physical starts coming in when they start getting the reactions they want so that they can go claim to be a victim or being cheated on or being abused when they're the ones doing it. People who have a long history of abuse themselves, from being abusive as a child to being abusive as an adult, until they themselves have a mirror held up right in front of their face and they themselves deal with what basically have to deal with what they've been doing and it's shown to them. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. Their abuse is going to keep evolving, and they're going to keep leaving a path of bodies of people behind them that have been harmed by them in some way, shape, or form. Those like myself who've grown up dealing with abuse in that sense on a non-stop and never had defended or stood up for myself, I was in essence groomed and raised to be susceptible to being around people who are going to abuse me. And because of the level of shit that I went through with my narc, they succeeded at not just breaking me as a person, they succeeded at me waking up and finally understanding what my grandma meant by everything that she was teaching me as a child. Everything she taught all of us grandkids. It wasn't just me, all of us, boys and girls, all of her grandkids. I've watched people once people finally recognize what they're doing or who they are or what they're, if they genuinely are good, are good people, and they just don't realize that they have those traits in them and that part in them, and once they're showing them, a lot of times those people will get help and they can correct those behaviors so that they're not breaking people down and creating abusive situations for them to turn around and go wonder why it's happening all the time, because they're not willing to make a recognition of their own shit and their behaviors that are creating those scenarios to happen. There are people, and of course there are people out there who go, how could you be abusive and not know it? Come on, let's put it in this sense. How could I have gone a decade being with somebody and not know that I was being cheated on through half of it? There's some people are really good at covering shit up. Some people are also really good at intentionally ignoring the flags when they know that there's something wrong and they choose to be oblivious to it. So in my situation, that was my fault. I saw the red flags and I ignored them. Because I actually trusted who I was with. I thought they were loyal. They told me they would never do to me what my ex-wife did to me and all that. No, they did everything my ex-wife did to me and then some. Shit my parents did to me. Shit my own family's done to me. Shit that other people have done to me that they know about. See, my narc, they made this argument, recently that they never made any promises to me that they wouldn't do this, that, and oh yeah, they did. They promised that they would never treat me the way my ex-wife treated me, the way she did. I mean, my narc talked a lot of shit about my ex-wife, and I would call her out on it. It's like, no.
It's not okay. What my ex-wife did was wrong, but that's not okay. You don't promise people that you're not going to treat them a certain way. You're not going to cheat on them, do all this shit and say, and then go fucking treat them that way and cheat on them and then say, I never made a promise to you. Nobody has a right to be abused in any way, shape, or form. Nobody has a right to abuse people like that in any way, shape, or form. Everybody has a right to stand up and protect and defend themselves when it's going on, in any means. So long as you're not out to take the life of somebody or to try to do harm, because that's your intentions behind that is going to be on you. I don't advise people to go out and just start hurting their abusers. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about vigilantism. I'm talking about self-defense. When somebody's intentionally trying to do harm to you, mentally, physically, sexually, emotionally, you have right to protect yourself and defend yourself. Thanks for watching. I don't mean to trigger a lot of people on this shit. I'm trying my best to try and be clear about this in a way that people can understand. But this is a sensitive subject. For like myself, I can't watch certain shows, listen to certain music. I can't watch certain movies or anything. Because if I see certain things, it triggers the shit I went through. And I know a lot of people can understand that. Whether you're somebody who's dealing with PTSD from being in the military and having to serve overseas and all that, or you're somebody at home who's married being abused by your spouse. You see certain things going on, it's going to trigger your shit. When certain things that are said, it's going to trigger your shit. And that's not what I'm intending to do. What I want people to do who are being abused out there or have been abused severely, I want them to understand and realize you have right to protect and defend yourself. Nobody has right to treat you as a punching bag in any way, shape, or form. In the moment they do, they need to accept the reaction that they will get in response is going to be that of one that is going to be that of equal or greater. You do not have a right to abuse people. And you're not obligated to be abused because you love them. If two people genuinely love each other and recognize that there are issues going on that need to be solved, they need to acknowledge those situations. They need to communicate like adults, start being adults when it comes to that shit, and get some fucking help and start fucking working together. Otherwise, you both need to go separate directions because one or both of you are going to end up in jail.